It is after 12, so I'll get started. Glad to see you all. Good afternoon. Welcome to Preservation Connecticut's Spring 2021 series talking about preservation. Our noontime chats about everything preservation. I'm Jane Montanaro, Executive Director of Preservation Connecticut, and I'm delighted to be your host today. Preservation Connecticut is a statewide nonprofit historic preservation organization established in 1975 by special act of the Connecticut General Assembly as the Connecticut Trust for Historic Preservation. We preserve, protect, and promote the buildings, sites, and landscapes that contribute to the heritage and vitality of Connecticut's communities. For over 4 decades, we have successfully championed the protection of remarkable community assets all over the state by leveraging funding, advocating, forming partnerships, and promoting stewardship. Our office is on Whitney Avenue in Hamden, Connecticut, listed on the National Register of Historic Places. Shown here, it's the Eli Whitney Boarding House, built in 1827, and has served as Preservation Connecticut's headquarters since 1989. We have a staff of 8 preservation professionals and an active and engaged board of 21 preservationists from around the state. Today's program is designed for you to talk directly with our staff about their programs and the challenges that they deal with. Stacy Vero, our circuit rider, and Renee Tribert, Making Places and Preservation Services Manager, will give us an overview of their programs and the work that they do. And we have other staff members on the call today to answer any questions. Because that is what we're here for today, to hear from you. Please feel free to use the chat to ask questions or ask questions directly afterwards in conversation. And of course, contact us directly at our office. So with that, Stacy, I'll turn it over to you to get started.
Okay. Can you go to the next? There you go. So we thought we would just get the conversation rolling this morning by talking about some of the questions that we get most often as circuit riders. And, you know, we get all sorts of questions. I think Brad and Mike can attest to that on a weekly basis, but these are the ones that we've decided are most commonly or frequently asked. And not surprisingly, the first one and foremost that we're asked is, how do we access funding for historic resources? We're going to have a little slide about that. And Mike, since he's in charge of our grant programs here and works closely with the SHPO, we'll go over that in a separate slide. Another question I get almost weekly is my property historic? So that means a lot of different things. There are local historic properties, there are state register properties, there are national register properties. We have access to most of those lists, and we can point you in the right direction to see if your property is listed. We can check with the SHPO and get that answer for you pretty quickly. A lot of people don't realize that if a property is listed in a district, National Register district, that they are listed on the National Register. So we go through that type of discussion with people regularly. If a property isn't listed, we talk about how that process works, and we point them again in the direction of the SHPO to get that process started. And we can also point them in the direction of some great consultants to help them with that process. You see the picture on the left, which is the worst outcome, but how can I protect my historic resource? And I'm going to have a little slide about that, going into that a little bit more in depth. But again, there are a number of ways to ensure protection for the historic resource. It doesn't always work, but we'll give it our best shot and give you the best tools to try to protect your historic resource moving forward. One thing we've been getting a lot lately is, how can I promote historic preservation at the local level? How can I promote local advocacy? You know, there's so many other pressures and aspects playing out in municipal government at this point, you know, sustainability, affordable housing, all these other issues, economic development. We try to work with communities to incorporate historic preservation into that discussion and make sure that it's prioritized. One of the negatives that you see again on the left is all the demolitions, and Renee will get into that a little bit later. But I'm finding a positive. There are so many people moving into the state, and we're seeing some demolitions as a result of that. But I'm also getting a lot of cold calls from people who are just trying to figure out what the best thing it is that they can do for their resource. And that's a wonderful call to get, because you know that people are, you know, buying this property and they've fallen in love and they want to do right by it, even if it's not listed. So we help people through that process. We point them to the preservation bulletins that are available online. And we also just provide them with technical assistance. And I think Mike and Brad will agree that one of the things we do more than anything is we just provide general information and we make connections. So that's the main thing we do as circuit riders. We problem solve. I'm gonna move things around here again. Hold on a second. So returning briefly to how to protect your historic resource, one of the best ways is through local historic district listing. Most towns have local historic districts. That's where a commission is in place and can review any changes to the exterior of properties that are visible from a public right-of-way. Great tool. Another tool that maybe Brad can talk about at a municipal level is the townwide historic preservation ordinance, which again is administered at the municipal level. One of the best ways to protect historic resources is to know what you have. So inventorying and identifying historic resources in a community should really be the first priority. And most, again, towns in Connecticut have an existing architectural survey in place, but it might not be complete. So you can contact your municipality and see if it needs an update to that townwide survey. And there is funding in place to implement another one and to update it if needed. So this is not administered through our office, but there is environmental review, a process that can take place. It's called Section 106 or Connecticut Environmental Policy Act. Those are protections that take place at the SHPO, but what those entail are review of historic resources. They take historic resources into account if state and federal money is used to fund a project. So if a project is going to impact a historic resource, it will take that resource into account as part of the entire process. So it doesn't stop a project from happening, but it's a tool that will allow that resource to be represented in the discussion. And Brad again can talk about the Connecticut Environmental Protection Act. That's been very active lately. That's a tool that we have. It's unique to Connecticut, and it's been very well used lately. So, and then easements are always sort of the gold standard for protection of historic properties. We administer them through our organization. Chris Wiegren is the person that you would contact to talk about that. But it's also just a legal document that you can place on your property individually. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mike to talk about money.
Can you hear me okay? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we offer, Preservation Connecticut offers 3 funding sources currently. I'll go over them very quickly, and then if anyone has specific questions about them, I'm happy to answer. Actually, before I talk about any of these programs, going back to Stacy's slide about what kind of questions we often get. A lot of times when people are interested in grant funding, it's for an immediate need. None of these programs, except for one, are really designed for immediate problems. These are programs that should be thought about in the larger context of restoration projects or general maintenance. So, so a lot of times, you know, if you have a leaking roof and it needs to be changed in 2 weeks, these programs probably aren't the right fit for that. So the first one is called the Maintenance and Repair Grant, and it's specific for churches or church-owned properties. So for religious organizations, that's a matching grant for up to $15,000. It's offered once a year. It's just closed for this year. And the 1772 grant is a similar one-for-one matching grant for up to $10,000, but that is for private nonprofits. And those are both for capital work, meaning actual restoration work, like I use the example for roof, window restoration, things of that nature. And then the circuit riders and some of our other staff, we have access to a TAC grant, we call it. It's called a Technical Assistance Consultancy. And that is if you're having a problem, usually related to some kind of engineering or safety issue, we can hire an engineer directly to come out to nonprofits or municipally owned buildings to try to get some answers about, quick answers about future steps to take to either stabilize a problem, or sometimes we use that program as kind of a step into applying for some of these larger grants as well. I don't know if there's anything that's, like I said, if there's specific questions, I'm happy to answer those. And I'll go over quickly these State Historic Preservation Office funding sources. So there's two we deal with a lot, and that's the Survey and Planning Grant Program. That's for both nonprofits and municipalities. That program is for planning money, as it sounds. So that can pay for architectural fees. It can pay for state register nominations, as Stacy pointed out. It can pay for overall conditions assessment for buildings. So basically you can hire an architect to look at a building in its entirety and prioritize projects based on their observations. That's usually a recommended step before applying for larger capital grants to actually do restoration work. And it often feeds into the next program, which is called the Historic Restoration Fund. And that's also a capital grant matching one-for-one up to $100,000. But again, planning is a key component in getting and having a successful grant application. Then for homeowners, there is a Historic Homes Tax Credit Program for eligible restoration costs for homes that are listed on the state or national register, either individually or in a district. And then Brad can answer questions about the state and federal tax credit program, but that's generally for kind of commercial, and Renee can also for commercial developers. And I think that's a quick overview, but like I said, questions about the specifics, I'm happy to answer.
Great, thank you, Mike. Technical assistance, sorry. Renee, is this where you're picking up the conversation?
I guess so, unless Brad wants to address some of the SEPA things or whatever, but I'll just follow the slides, I guess, for now. So Stacy mentioned our easement program, and you just heard from Mike about our technical assistance program. Sometimes we combine these, but I just thought it would be fun to share. Preservation Connecticut holds easements on a group of 19th century row houses. They were worker housing in the Yantic section of Norwich. And in one of the buildings in the slide on the upper left, as you can see, they have a leak problem that they've not been able to resolve. And so we offered them a TAC and are working with them to try and see if we can resolve that. And in this case, we hired an engineer, and then Mike actually got his drone out, our modern tools for the tasks. And I don't know if you can see the drone in the air on the lower right-hand side, lower right-hand picture. But at any rate, that's just something that we offer. Next. Preservation Connecticut has done a number of surveys over the years, and many of them, the information from them is available on our various websites. So you can find a whole lot of information about a historic property that you may be interested in, whether or not, for example, it's in a local historic district, as Stacy was talking about. And the barns, which are very popular. Creative places is either buildings or art or public spaces, sometimes homes that speak to the modernist movement in Connecticut, whether it's writers, artists, thinkers. And then the Mills website came out of a survey of historic industrial properties throughout the state of Connecticut, which is how I kind of got involved in Preservation Connecticut. And there in that website, we also have more useful information, potentially talking about current uses. And the idea here is to encourage reuse of mill properties. And you can access like assessor records directly and stuff like that. We have another one that's about to get underway. They're reviewing for an Olmsted survey in the state of Connecticut. Next. So out of the mill survey has come a program where we try to connect and network with mill owners, with potentially interested buyers, with municipalities, et cetera, just to assist in the preservation and reuse of historic industrial buildings. And another thing that grew out of that is some fee-for-service work that my colleague Jordan Sorensen and I offer. And so we can do state and or national register nominations, but we focus a lot on the historic rehabilitation tax credit application program. And this is just an example of a property that we're assisting the owner with in Manchester. It's an old mill property. The dye house, 1923 dye house, you can see the comparative pictures. It was looking pretty shabby, and we have gone through the process. We've gotten the part 3. The work is obviously nearing completion. And we're actually going to be helping the owner with another building on site. In the lower left photograph, it's the wood frame mill that can be seen to the right behind the dye house. Next, please. So Stacy's first photo had a picture of a tear down in process, which makes all of us very sad. But we do track demolition threats on our website, and you can actually submit if you are aware of something or concerned about something. You can submit on a form through our website. In about 59 of our 169 towns have demo delay ordinances that typically put a pause for a look for alternatives to demolition for about 90 days. And Preservation Connecticut or concerned citizens can receive notification of any demolition permits that are submitted to those towns that have the demo delay ordinances. we'll be getting into this in more detail, I think, in one of our sessions in the fall. Next, please. And then kind of coming out of the demolition, it is hardly the optimal solution, but when it looks like demolition is inevitable, we can help facilitate potential salvage of materials, historic fabric from buildings. And in this project, it's a former house, and the floorboards, the wide plank boards up in the attic, mantles, etc., are being salvaged for reuse in other projects. So again, not your best optimal use, but at least we're doing, we can try and help to save some of the materials and reuse them. And that's it.
Great, thank you, Renee. Brad, if you're able, Stacy had mentioned municipal engagement in doing preservation ordinances. Could you chat a little bit about how someone might go about doing that in their community?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Brad Scheid, actually in the field right now. Preservation ordinances was actually several years ago in the legislature. We and a collection of advocates pushed for these, what's called a preservation ordinance. First one was in Hartford. Basically, it's a municipal ordinance, so it means it has to start at the municipal level. But what these ordinances do is kind of an alternative. Look, a local historic district has state regs and is also really important, but we've been having a hard time getting those approved. So the preservation ordinance was kind of an alternative to that. It was also in areas where there might not have been a National Register district, but yet lots of great historic resources. So yeah, so Hartford, New Britain, and Milford have it at the moment, and we have worked with some other towns. COVID kind of hit. We were working on one in New London, and COVID kind of hit, so we'll go see if we can resurrect that. But essentially, it's like a local. The structure, it has to be passed at the municipal level, city council, board of selectmen level, and it basically just gives municipalities in a particular area. So it's not usually the whole city. It's usually a National Register district or an area in town. Municipalities usually create design guidelines and will control what kind of happens in those specific areas. It's not for every town. Some towns have been interested, some have not. New London, we've been working there because it's like near the waterfront. There's been a lot of interest. And again, a local historic district, it has a vote. It has a lot of pieces that the preservation ordinance does not have. And so it's just kind of an alternative, but they're kind of along the same lines. They don't control paint color, but they control design, and there would be actually a commission that reviews alterations, demolition, whatever, in a particular area. So I think that's pretty much it in a nutshell.
Yep, great. Thank you, Brad. Another tool for folks to use. We try to take advantage of all the tools that we have in our toolbox because they're all important and serve slightly different roles. See, I know there was some activity in the chat, but I haven't kept up.
Yeah, there was a question from Gwen Bruno that Mike has offered to answer. So.
Oh, good. Connections already being made. So
Yeah,
I'll
well,
open it up.
Yeah, I should say that Gwen has been working really hard in Windham. It's a former inn, and she, I mean, this is just, it's a preservation story, and I don't know if Gwen wants to, you know, talk briefly about her experiences for everybody on the phone, but they pretty much have taken on this inn, which was threatened to be demolished, and, you know, they're, as a group, you know, trying to take, you know, matters into their own hands, and they've applied to SHPO for a planning grant at the moment, but they're also looking at HRF and all sources of funds right now for this property. And again, Jane, I don't know if you want Gwen to say a few words or not, but let me tell you, they have been working really hard in that town.
Well, certainly,
Thank you,
if Gwen, you'd like to share, that would be great.
Hi, my name is Gwen Bruno, and I am the proud owner of the 7 Swift House in Windham Center. And I am also chairperson of Windham Preservation, Inc. And I organized Windham Preservation, Inc. with Andrew Gibson, who owns the Laura, I think it's the Laura Hutchinson House, another historic home in Windham. But the reason we organized is because we were appalled that a former owner of the Windham Inn sought to demolish the inn. Windham did not want to see the inn demolished, so they offered to organize us, and in fact the town incorporated us, and then we went after nonprofit status, and we were able to negotiate a donation of the inn from the inn's former owners, and so now we own the inn. We have no money, and so we're going after grant funding. We applied to SHPO in January for a survey and planning grant, ostensibly to determine what the best reuse cases for the inn would be. Everybody has an opinion, and some of them are good ones, but we don't ever want to see the inn in the condition it's in. But I'm a little frustrated because we've had the grant in there, the grant app, since January. We've gotten lots of positive feedback on it, but it's just been so overwhelmed that we just keep getting bumped. You know, we applied while the grant could be non-matching, and we don't have the funds to match. So I'm anxious to move forward on that. And I realize that Windham may have a black mark on it as far as historic restoration goes due to the activities in Willimantic. But Windham Center is considered separate. Everybody wants to see this building restored. As a matter of fact, the most vocal opponents of saving Helen Hooker are members, dues-paying members of Windham Preservation, Inc. So, you know, we just seem to be stuck at this point. And I'd like to, you know, and the town has even reached out and said, you know, we have small city block grant funding. Let's see if we can give you some to get started. So we've come that far, but we'd really like to get this grant to put us on the right track as far as repurposing the inn.
Well, that's great, Gwen. Thank you for sharing the update. I'm sure your grant will get through the process at the state office. I know they have extended the deadline for getting the match waived because there has been such a great demand for that.
Right.
So, you know, I'm sure that'll get processed pretty soon. And great to see that you're getting a lot of good feedback from other members of the community. And, you know, we're big fans of downtown Willimantic. We've fought hard to save some of the resources there. And that whole area just is a fabulous historic area, Windham and Willimantic.
It's part of what drew me to the area, and I love it. We have so much to offer, and our mission, in our mission statement, we extend our interest in historic properties to all of Windham, and we are, you know, we have more interest than hands at this point, but we're trying to move ahead.
Right. Well, You're doing all the right things, and the circuit riders and staff at Preservation Connecticut are here to provide, resources and support to you. I know Brad's been pretty heavily involved in that community with all the community organizing around issues. Looking at these grant programs is definitely the first step, and keeping the community engaged and perhaps helping to, strengthen your board and build your organization too. We could be assets to you in that.
Okay. We've had a lot of feedback from the community and a lot of donations of service. We've had local tree service take down some invasive trees that were threatening, the foundation, the West Wall Foundation. We have somebody doing gratis to us as built plans. And, we've gotten a lot of community involvement. We do cleanup days, exterior cleanup days, and everybody shows up. So we've got a lot of community involvement. We just are anxious to move ahead, and we just would like SHPO to make a decision.
You'll get there. Sometimes in preservation, you have to have a little patience, a lot of tenacity, a little patience, and just keep plugging away. It'll all come together.
Failure is not an option for us.
Right. Well, you're doing great work. We're really impressed with how you've brought the community together, and all the volunteers that come out and help, doing a tremendous job.
Thank you.
Hi, Gwen. This is Mike Perino. Who is the owner of the inn? Is it
Windham Preservation, Inc. The former owners of the inn negotiated a donation to us.
Yeah, Mike, they were slumlords, and they tried to knock the building down, and Gwen and the whole community was in uproar, and a huge turnout, and pushed that off. And then Gwen and the group just stayed involved with these characters who they're owners, but they really didn't want to do anything with the property, it seemed like. And so it's a good thing they were taken out, because they weren't planning to do anything.
No.
Actually, I know.
RCN took back the building from the original owner or the earlier owner because he had defaulted. And it's
right.
Interesting. He had defaulted to them, but the original owner of the prior owner of the inn also owned my home, and he defaulted to yet another commercial lender in Massachusetts, and I bought my home from that commercial lender. And RCN came in. If anybody was at the meeting, the mouthy blonde woman was me. And I challenged the engineer's report. I'm not an engineer, but I do write for a living, and I manage the proposal process for my employer. And I was able to, I recognized the writing for what it is, and I was able to challenge it. But I did stay in touch with RCN, and I sent them some information that I thought would help them collect monies from the defaulting owner. And so they reached out to me. They wanted to be able to take a tax deduction, and we wanted to be able to fundraise effectively. So we went and worked with Cooley, which is the Connecticut Urban Legal Initiative. It's for nonprofits who have no money. It's very low cost, and it's run by another Windham resident, Barbara McGrath, attorney Barbara McGrath, who owns the J. Olden Warehouse. And she works with, she is a law professor, and she works with her grad students, and they support us. So they were able to work with us to negotiate a donation agreement. And now we own the inn, Windham Preservation.
What year, Gwen, did you become a 501c3?
I think it was the beginning of 2020. I can double check that date.
I know you asked a question about the community development block grant and using that as potential matching source for funding.
Yes.
Because I would have to, because that money comes through the state, it probably couldn't be used to match state funds, but something like our 1772 foundation grant for next year, that's private foundation money, so it could be used to match that. So, just so long as you don't have two state sources of money matching together, you're okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I believe the community development block grant, Mike, is federal money. I think you have to double check, but it's usually federal money.
Okay, so in that case, it's a good question, Gwen, and we'd have to double check, but I'm not sure.
Okay. We do fundraise, but we don't have, any major funding resources. We do have a local fundraising consultant who said if we can get the survey and planning grant, that makes us viable to larger donors. And if we can get that, she would be willing to look at the possibility of helping us with a major fundraising appeal.
So was the survey and planning grant for a condition assessment of the inn?
Yes. We actually we were looking for a feasibility study currently, and that's what we applied for. And we would be able to, I think, make good use of that. We also uncovered some possible use for a new survey, because the preservation professional who's donating the time and providing us with as-built plans, we gave her all the information that she asked for, and she said she believes that the lot lines are not accurate, and she believes that the inn actually owns the land that other people are using right now. So, we're thinking we may also need a survey as well. We're also talking with our mayor and Representative Johnson. Willimantic gets small city block grant funding every year, and they've gotten it for this year. And they're talking to us about sharing some of it with us this year so we can get started.
That sounds great. Sounds like you're tapping into a lot of good resources to get you started. And I'm sure you'll see that one grant builds off, leads you to another. So you're starting with the right building blocks to get you going. With Barbara McGrath's organization at the Institute, and the survey and planning grants. It's all just building one step at a time, bringing in your local legislators and all of your community and all the development expertise that you can get.
Yeah, we accept help from all over, and a lot of people have come forward and really been very generous with time and expertise, and we're very grateful.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your project with us.
Thank you.
And I'm happy to touch base with you after, Gwen. If you want to take my email down at the end, we can have follow-up conversation about some of the funding.
Okay, that's great. Is that Brad?
That's Mike. Mike for
okay.
M. Perino.
Okay, thank you, Mike.
Did anyone else on the line today want to talk about a specific question or project or program?
Jane, we did get another question beforehand, and it was, is it historically appropriate to keep wood shutters on a dairy barn built circa 1830 to 1900 that originally did not have them? And then is it always recommended to restore to original conditions when feasible?
Who wants to take that question?
But I could start. You know, if the wood shutters, but it would really depend, I think, is my answer, because if it was converted to a residence during a period of significance, then that would tell that story. So then we would want to keep the shutters, right? Because it tells the story of the continuation of the property as it moves through time. If you're interpreting the building as a barn and you want to restore the barn to its original condition, that's sort of a choice that you can make, then it obviously would not have had shutters and you'd want to remove them. But again, that's sort of a philosophical question that you deal with when you're restoring a building, you know, restoring it to a period of significance. So we'd have to find out a little bit more about that. And if the person who asked that is on this call, we'd be happy to talk about it.
That's why contacting the circuit riders is great. They can come out and take a look at your barn and see what your goals are, and see the whole, you know, site in context, and maybe point out other areas that maybe you should be focusing on for repairs or maintenance, and provide guidance on that, and provide guidance on any potential funding sources and consultants.
Yeah, that was my question. This is Dabney.
Hi, Dabney.
Hi. Yeah, I have it was considered a dairy house, which was originally part of the Frederick Bronson estate here in Greenfield Hill in Fairfield. And it was originally sat between two barns. And it doesn't look like a house that was, it doesn't look like a structure that was necessarily built for an agrarian purpose. It has the original structure has a second floor, but there's records that it was where the milk was bottled. So we're thinking that maybe a manager or some kind of employee lived possibly on the second floor. But we have loved living in this house and exploring the history. But now we're at a juncture where we're trying to figure out whether or not to keep or replace the wood louvered shutters. And it's difficult because we're in a historic, you know, we're part of a historic district here where the commissioners have varying points of view on issues like this. So while it has been a house and it does tell part of that story, we're seeking to sort of restore the original part of the house to how it originally looked, so that it can maintain its historical significance, the original part of the house. And then the additions that were put on subsequently, we have no problem with, you know, with telling the story of it becoming a residence. So I just wanted your thoughts on that.
So it is in a local historic district, you're saying?
It is, yes.
Yep, so you'll have guidance from the commission.
Yeah, a lot of opposing guidance, yeah. They can't seem to agree on what. And, you know, and that's the case, that is the struggle here. We've lived here for 16 years. My husband and I both grew up in homes that were in historic districts in Maryland. We have a house in a historic district in Massachusetts. And part of the struggle is that when you have these houses that are very old, that are historically significant or part of a historically significant area, or tell the story of that area's history, as it would here in Greenfield Hill, was a very agrarian community up until not too long ago. It's difficult when these structures get built onto over the years and their uses change. And then it becomes a question of what is it that we're trying to preserve? Are we trying to preserve the original structure? Are we trying to preserve a really ugly addition that was put on in 1954 that really doesn't serve the original structure, but it's 50 years old? So now do we consider that historic? So there are all these different pieces at play, so that when homeowners, and we experience this a lot in Massachusetts, when homeowners, and just as a side note, I used to work in adaptive reuse and sat on a preservation trust board in Massachusetts. And this is something that homeowners were constantly struggling with, and we were always struggling with in terms of guidance. What is it exactly that you're trying to preserve? So I'm just always interested in hearing other people's opinions about it in the industry.
Have you been working with an architect? Sounds like you want to do significant renovations to the.
Oh, no. It's we really just want to remove the shutters permanently so that the original part of the house looks. The rest of the house is, for the most part, of the original structure, for the most part, is exactly the way the front door was moved from one window bay to over one. So other than that, without the shutters, it looks exactly as it did when it was originally built, which is our desire. But some of the commissioners on the HDC here make the argument, as you did, that the shutters tell the story of it becoming changing its use to residential. We're still trying to figure out when the shutters were put on, but it's our desire to see that the original part of the house go back to looking exactly how it did when it was originally built. So it's just it starts to get into that gray area of what are we trying to, what's the goal here? What time period are we trying to preserve or restore to?
Mm-hmm.
And everybody seems to have a different opinion on that.
Well, we can look, Dabney, at the National Register District nomination, if there is one that overlaps. We could talk about it some more, and I can do a little research, but we can establish a period of significance, or it has been established in that document. So we can review that, and we can maybe see if there are any historic photos from that, dating from that period, depending on when it ended. And
it's interesting. We have not a ton, but we have several photos of it in its original location in the late 1800s. But then there are no photos in the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s when what I assumed the shutters were put on, because the building was moved from its original location at some point to become a dwelling. And the question is, were the shutters put on when it was originally moved to become a dwelling, or did someone put them on after the fact when various additions were placed onto the house? So it's, and there's not a lot of record keeping in this part of Connecticut during that time, between the wars and after World War II. So, so it's been a struggle, but I'm determined to keep looking.
Understood. I'm fascinated. I just Googled it while we were waiting here, and I'm fascinated by the windmill that was associated with.
Well, I'll tell you, if you guys have time, I'll tell you a really sad preservation story that could be avoided in the future if people pay attention. That windmill, which was the original windmill for the Bronson estate, was under the, I think it's registered nationally, but it's under the care of Fairfield Country Day School, which now occupies the building that was the manor house of the estate. And they were going, in order to raise the funds to restore it to its original glory, because it was really falling apart, and this is going back maybe 10, 15 years, they contracted with a cell phone tower company and agreed that they were going to install a cell phone tower inside the windmill, but it was going to be encased inside of the lower part so that no one would ever see the cell tower. And that money was going to pay for the windmill's restoration. So when they were going to put the cell tower in, they took the top of it off and they carefully marked and numbered each of the what do you call them? The wings, but
Oh, like the paddles?
yeah, the paddles, right. And put them into a storage area. And it took some time for the cell phone company to come in and do all their surveying and engineering and get the tower in. Well, then when they went to go put it back together again, the paddles were gone. And they were the original paddles. And it turns out that in an effort to find more storage space in the school, the the maintenance crew at the school didn't know what they were, just thought it was old wood and threw it away.
Oh,
So
that is sad.
yeah, people need to pay attention, and it was so avoidable, and everybody was really, as you can imagine, upset.
Yeah.
And it was decided by somebody that they weren't going, that it would really taint the windmill to try to put new paddles on it. So it stands there with no paddles on it, and it looks really strange. I mean, you drive by it, you're like, what on God's green earth is that? It looks like a lighthouse with no light at the top. It's just very, very strange. So anyway, and it was really, really sad. We take a lot of pride in preserving history here in this community. It's a small community. We've got about 500 houses. Large majority of those are historic, and there's a lot of rich history here. So it was really too bad. So yeah.
Thank you for sharing that story with us, Dabney. Stacy, if you want to connect with her later about, more guidance on the shutters for the barn.
Sure, be happy
That'd
to.
be great. Thank you.
Stacy's email is right here, svero@preservationct.org. We have a few minutes remaining if anyone else had something they wanted to discuss. Well, I hope this has been helpful. Preservation staff at Preservation Connecticut do a multitude of advising, and feel free to reach out to us with any questions. We're happy to talk on the phone, make site visits. Our 3 circuit riders are in the field, and Brad, thank you for multitasking and driving and chatting with us at the same time. I was a little worried. And we have other preservation staff too. Renee Tribert, Chris Wiegren joined us, Jordan Sorensen, and Kristen Hopewood. And we're all here to assist you with your preservation questions anytime. So please feel free to reach out to us. We put together some resources at the end of this slide deck that will be useful for you. And next week, we're going to talk about historic lighthouses. So I hope you can join us for that conversation. So thank you all so much for joining us. We'll talk to you all soon.
Thank you.
so much.
Thanks.
Have a great
Bye-bye.
day.
You too.
Bye now.